Chapter 20, Part 3 of Book 8 of Les Miserables, Volume 3 by Victor Hugo. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Catherine Eastman. Les Miserables, Volume 3 by Victor Hugo. Translated by Isabel Florence Hapgood. Book 8. The Wicked Poor Man. Chapter 20. The Trap. Part 3. Marius waited in a state of anxiety that was augmented by every trifle. The enigma was more impenetrable than ever. Who was this little one whom Thénardier had called the Lark? Was she his Ursule? The prisoner had not seemed to be affected by that word, the Lark, and had replied in the most natural manner in the world, "I do not know what you mean." On the other hand, the two letters UF were explained. They meant Urbain Fabre, and Ursule was no longer named Ursule. This was what Marius perceived most clearly of all. A sort of horrible fascination held him nailed to his post, from which he was observing and commanding this whole scene. There he stood, almost incapable of movement or reflection, as though annihilated by the abominable things viewed at such close quarters. He waited in the hope of some incident, no matter of what nature, since he could not collect his thoughts and did not know upon what course to decide. "In any case," he said, "if she is the Lark, I shall see her, for the Thénardier woman is to bring her hither. That will be the end, and then I will give my life and my blood, if necessary, but I will deliver her. Nothing shall stop me." Nearly half an hour passed in this manner. Thénardier seemed to be absorbed in gloomy reflections. The prisoner did not stir. Still, Marius fancied that at intervals, and for the last few moments, he had heard a faint, dull noise in the direction of the prisoner. All at once, Thénardier addressed the prisoner. "By the way, Monsieur Fabre, I might as well say it to you at once." These few words appeared to be the beginning of an explanation. Marius strained his ears. "My wife will be back shortly. Don't get impatient. I think that the Lark really is your daughter, and it seems to me quite natural that you should keep her. Only listen to me a bit. My wife will go and hunt her up with your letter. I told my wife to dress herself in the way she did, so that your young lady might make no difficulty about following her. They will both enter the carriage with my comrade behind. Somewhere outside the barrier there is a trap harnessed to two very good horses. Your young lady will be taken to it. She will alight from the fiacre. My comrade will enter the other vehicle with her, and my wife will come back here to tell us it's done. As for the young lady, no harm will be done to her. The trap will conduct her to a place where she will be quiet, and just as soon as you have handed over to me those little 200,000 francs, she will be returned to you. If you have me arrested, my comrade will give a turn of his thumb to the Lark. That's all." The prisoner uttered not a syllable. After a pause, Thénardier continued. "It's very simple, as you see. There'll be no harm done unless you wish that there should be harm done. I'm telling you how things stand. I warn you so that you may be prepared." He paused. The prisoner did not break the silence, and Thénardier resumed. "As soon as my wife returns and says to me, 'The Lark is on the way,' we will release you, and you will be free to go and sleep at home. You see that our intentions are not evil." Terrible images passed through Marius's mind. What? That young girl whom they were abducting was not to be brought back? One of those monsters was to bear her off into the darkness? Whither? And what if it were she? It was clear that it was she. Marius felt his heart stop beating. What was he to do? Discharge the pistol? Place all those scoundrels in the hands of justice? But the horrible man with a meat-axe would, none the less, be out of reach with the young girl, and Marius reflected on Thénardier's words, of which he perceived the bloody significance. "If you have me arrested, my comrade will give a turn of his thumb to the lark." Now it was not alone by the colonel's testament, it was by his own love, it was by the peril of the one he loved, that he felt himself restrained. This frightful situation, which had already lasted above half an hour, was changing its aspect every moment. Marius had sufficient strength of mind to review in succession all the most heartbreaking conjectures, seeking hope, and finding none. The tumult of his thoughts contrasted with the funereal silence of the den. In the midst of this silence, the door at the bottom of the staircase was heard to open and shut again. The prisoner made a movement in his bonds. "Here's the bourgeoise," said Thénardier. He had hardly uttered the words when the Thénardier woman did in fact rush hastily into the room, red, panting, breathless, with flaming eyes, and cried as she smote her huge hands on her thighs simultaneously, "False address!" The ruffian who had gone with her made his appearance behind her, and picked up his axe again. She resumed, "Nobody there! Rue Saint-Dominique, number 17? No, Monsieur Urbain Fabre, they know not what it means." She paused, choking, then went on. "Monsieur Thénardier, that old fellow has duped you. You are too good, you see. If it had been me, I'd have chopped the beast in 4 quarters to begin with. And if he had acted ugly, I'd have boiled him alive. He would have been obliged to speak, and say where the girl is, and where he keeps his shiners. That's the way I should have managed matters. People are perfectly right when they say that men are a deal stupider than women. Nobody at number 17. It's nothing but a big carriage gate. No Monsieur Fabre in the Rue Saint-Dominique. And after all that racing and fee to the coachman and all, I spoke to both the porter and the portress, a fine, stout woman, and they know nothing about him." Marius breathed freely once more. She, Ursule, or the lark, he no longer knew what to call her, was safe. While his exasperated wife vociferated, Thénardier had seated himself on the table. For several minutes he uttered not a word, but swung his right foot, which hung down, and stared at the brazier with an air of savage reverie. Finally he said to the prisoner, with a slow and singularly ferocious tone, "A false address? What did you expect to gain by that?" "To gain time!" cried the prisoner in a thundering voice, and at the same instant he shook off his bonds. They were cut. The prisoner was only attached to the bed now by one leg. Before the 7 men had time to collect their senses and dash forward, he had bent down into the fireplace, had stretched out his hand to the brazier, and had then straightened himself up again, and now Thénardier, the female Thénardier, and the ruffians, huddled in amazement at the extremity of the hovel, stared at him in stupefaction, as, almost free and in a formidable attitude, he brandished above his head the red-hot chisel, which emitted a threatening glow. The judicial examination to which the ambush in the Gorbeau house eventually gave rise established the fact that a large sou piece, cut and worked in a peculiar fashion, was found in the garret when the police made their descent on it. This sou piece was one of those marvels of industry which are engendered by the patience of the galleys in the shadows and for the shadows, marvels which are nothing else than instruments of escape. These hideous and delicate products of wonderful art are to jewelers' work what the metaphors of slang are to poetry. There are Benvenuto Cellinis in the galleys, just as there are Villons in language. The unhappy wretch who aspires to deliverance finds means sometimes without tools, sometimes with a common wooden handled knife,